As we all know, Diaoyu Island is a very small island and seems to be a minor thing if things have not been blowing out of proportion. So why have they triggered such a major dispute? And well, besides the role with Japan, China also has to deal with disputes with other Asian countries as well. And as we'll see, the U.S. seems to play a significant role, or at least some Chinese believe. So let's take a look at this clip.
The Diaoyu Islands, which the Japanese call Senkaku, lie about 190 kilometres east of Taiwan and about 500 kilometres from Japan's Okinawa Island. Both China and Japan claim sovereignty. Some critics say the dispute is a disruptive mine planted by the US into Sino-Japanese relations nearly 4 decades ago. When the US decided to return the occupied Okinawa to Japan in 1972, the Diaoyu Islands, which belonged to China, were also handed over to Tokyo. The sovereignty row has been a source of frequent friction and has become a drag on bilateral relations. Analysts say Japanese claims fall in line with US strategies to create and take advantage of tension in East Asia. Those strategies are also reflected in the South China Sea dispute. In July this year, US Secretary of State Hillary Clinton referred to US national interests in the South China Sea at a regional security forum in Vietnam. And the South China Sea was also on the agenda on Friday when US President Barack Obama met ASEAN leaders in New York.
As President, I've therefore made it clear that the United States intends to play a leadership role in Asia.
China has always opposed the internationalisation of the maritime issue. Analysts say the United States intervention will only complicate rather than help solve the issue.
Here it becomes more complicated. More Southeast Asian nations are involved, and the United States is involved. Professor Jia, is China, as some popular belief has said, turning its economic strength into diplomatic leverage?
Well, that's a matter of perspective. I do not think so. As a matter of fact, I just returned from a 1.5 dialogue to Singapore and Indonesia. People tell us on the, both on the table and off the record, that they don't know what to do. They are afraid of having to choose between the U.S. and China. So the U.S. role in all this is really very complicated. Actually, part of the concern on the Chinese part was references by Richard Armitage during this whole incident when he was in Tokyo, and he referred to certain U.S. role to this, because of course Armitage does not have any formal governmental role at this point of time. But sometimes we are concerned that the United States may act out of good intent, but is not truly knowledgeable of the local sensitivities in this region.
All right, so you believe there is something like a U.S. role in the whole issue. Professor Jimbo, in July, Secretary Clinton had this meeting with some Asian leaders and talking about U.S. role in the South China Sea issue, and later we see recently President Obama meeting leaders from Southeast Asia. Is the U.S. really having a big impact on all the decisions Tokyo is making, for example, right now about the incident?
Well, I think there has been a growing concern over the mismatch between the Chinese growing power in the coastal area and also the Southeast Asians' power to deal with it. So that there has been a growing demand for them to ask for the United States to heavily engage in this region to match up with the balance with it. So that what happened in the July at the ASEAN Regional Forum, when many of the ASEAN foreign ministers expressed their concern about the Chinese behavior in the South China Sea, and then the rising tension between Japan and China on the East China Sea has actually demanded more U.S. involvement in this region.
Right.
I think this is the way that many countries will respond to it.
But I must remind our audience here that if you look at the two wars the U.S. was involved in this part of the region, especially look at the escalation of conflict with Vietnam over the so-called Gulf of Tonkin sinking of a so-called U.S. warship, which never happened. U.S. involvement, given the in spite of the extensive intelligence network, the intellectuals, the military power, U.S. involvement can carry a lot of missteps. And now we ought to be a lot smarter. This is not a time to argue who is on the rise, who is down, or who is in or who is out. There is that fundamental concern that somehow China's rise, or quote-unquote rise, is leading to an erosion of U.S. influence. That's beside the point. What's important is that the governments and peoples of China, Japan, Vietnam, whoever else, need to know what they are doing. So that's what is important, is that we talk to each other, both on record and off record, and eliminate miscalculations.
But the thing is, would you agree with that, Dr. Park? There seems to be belief that the U.S. is taking advantage of the situation. There's also belief that maybe the Southeast Asian neighbors are taking advantage of the U.S. rally against China as a rising power, and therefore having U.S. involved.
Yes, I think so, because United States is encouraged by the action taken by the Asian leaders, that they stood behind the United States rather than China. And also Asian leaders want to discuss this matter with the United States more eagerly than ever before. And also they agreed to openly speak out the importance of peaceful resolution of the disputes regarding the Spratly Islands and South China Sea. And also U.S. emphasized it has its own stakes and interest in the freedom of navigation around the South China Sea. Thereby, United States has an opportunity to increase its own voice and say on this particular reason. That means that U.S. could take advantage of these demands from ASEAN leaders and also from Japan.
Given that roadmap, it seems that Dr. Park has already provided. Professor Zhao, what can China really do on this area? On the one hand, China really needs to resolve these territorial disputes, for example, with Japan and some other issues with its Southeast Asian neighbors. On the other hand, once China shows its firm attitude, the other would point to China and say, you are becoming so assertive, you are not ready to compromise, you're not ready to negotiate, let's go to the U.S. So what can China do?
Well, actually, I'm just repeating what I said to senior U.S. officials when they were visiting Beijing. Over the South China Sea, this so-called freedom of navigation issue is is misleading, because freedom of navigation for commercial, both ships, maritime ships and aircraft have never been an issue. And when it comes to innocent passage of military ships, for example, we allow the U.S. military warships to dock in Canton, and then you have to notify when you have certain warships going through the oceans. And the claim China has over the South China Sea never in any way means what some Americans term as denial of naval access to the South China Sea. There is the issue of historical international waters versus territorial waters. We even said, going back to 1958, that the Taiwan Straits is international waters. So a lot of times, like I said, it's a matter of a lot of times people think about themselves as experts. They parachute into a situation which is very complex.
But the thing is, what can China do?
Well,
Professor Zhao, very briefly, please.
On territorial matters, those are matters of principle. We need to stand firm, but nevertheless, it's very important not to overreact, not to let maybe incidents like this to affect the larger goal of having a peaceful relationship with your neighbors, and also have, before you can really... All
right, I think we have to wrap it up over there with your words, Professor Zhao. We think also open discussions like this involving all the players in the region probably is also important on public media and also off the record as well. Professor Zhao Daojun from China, Professor Tan Jimbo from Japan, and Dr. Sun-Won Park from South Korea, now staying in the United States. Thank you so much, gentlemen. Thank you.